Emily, I'm
How
so
are
glad that you put up with me because I'm on a Marxism kick. And some people think my Marxism kicks are really boring.
you? No, and I don't, yeah, I like how you say you're on one because I think you've been on it before. I don't feel
I've been
like,
on it before. I go in and out. I mean, I always think socialism is cool, but like I go in and out of like reading deep, like about like the origins of Marxism and the Russian Revolution and the French Revolution. And it's just really cool stuff.
why? What's something cool? Can you tell me something cool about it?
um, so I was actually just talking about this last night with my partner. So I also go on anarchist kicks sometimes, and I really like reading anarchist books. But I find that anarchist writers, I find them much easier to read, honestly, because they're totally fine with breaking with the past. They're like, this is a dumpster fire. Let's move on. And when I'm reading the socialists, they are like meticulously analyzing like how history unfolded, especially Marx. He has this idea of historical materialism. But it's like feudalism worked this way, and then it gave way to like monarchies, and then it gave way to like capitalism, and then capitalism is going to undo itself and is going to give way to socialism. That's what Marx's idea of how things are going to happen. And I find it really challenging because I'm not very well versed in the history of Europe. And that's also one of the big critiques of Marxism, right? Is like not a lot of deep understanding and nuance about economic systems in other parts of the world, although there's a lot of great people who have rectified that. Yeah, like Che and Mao being two examples, but also scholars. But anyway, I think it's really interesting. Like, should we break with the past and start over, or should we have a theory that like explains how the past happened and how that's going to make way for things to be better?
Hmm.
So that's one thing that I've been like really pondering on. There's others too, but I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I sort of want to hear that last part again, maybe, and we can bring some examples to it, but tell me the difference you said, the different approaches.
So this is just my own idea. I'm not sure who else agrees with me. But that like the anarchist thinkers tend to be like, states are bad, they've always been bad, we should not have a state anymore. And I feel like when I'm reading Marxism stuff, they're like, listen, it starts back in the hunter-gatherer area. Then we had farming and agriculture. Then
Mm.
we had guilds. Then we had a feudalism, and sort of like explaining like how economic and social context outgrew those systems and led to capitalism, and how capitalism is a temporary system on the way to something better.
Not to force the analogy here, but it does, in the technology sphere, it does sort of remind me of the like waterfall versus agile conversation,
Yeah.
that like all in one or it's iterative change over time.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So those two, and then there's this other idea in Marxism that I've been finding really interesting, which is like the inevitability of collapse. So there were some people who were like, capitalism has so many contradictions in it, and this is like a big Marxist concept, like overproduction is like part of capitalism because you're overworking workers. So they're going to keep producing more and more and more, and then eventually you're going to have too much stuff and no one is going to have any money to buy it. And so capitalism is going to undo itself, and it's going to happen inevitably, because that's like it's baked in to the format of capitalism. So then some people who were considered reformists, were like, well, if it's going to happen inevitably, then we should just sit back and wait. Like, why foment a revolution if like this is going to happen at some point anyway? So we might as well just like live a good life now and wait it out. And then other people were like, no, we have to like push the conditions of capitalism that are going to lead to collapse so that the revolution happens sooner. Even if it's inevitable, we want it to happen sooner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that fits into waterfall versus agile, but I think that the like idea of like, should we make incremental changes now? This was a major debate in Germany between the world wars. Was like, we could make conditions better now. And the Marxists generally were against that because they wanted the bigger change to happen. And they thought that making smaller changes would let the proletariat be comfortable instead of letting them be uncomfortable enough to make a big change.
Actually, now that you've described it in this way, it sounds more aligned to one of our non-binary conversations where we end up finding that you actually have a little bit of both, or there's different situations that are more appealing for one approach or the other.
Totally.
Because, yeah, there's certainly times when I'm thinking in my work that I can maybe see a disaster coming or maybe see that things aren't going to work out, but the path to choose is to go down that one.
Mm-hmm.
And let people experience that as well, so that future, work can have that experience from everyone involved. Although there's certainly a urge also to make everything comfortable right now, even if the long-term consequences are still going to be something rough.
It's so interesting. I think like politically, I'm more likely to choose less reform oriented policies, although I think there's room for really good reforms to happen, and I'm glad other people are working on them, and I even donate to support that, but it's not where I put my time. But then when I'm doing tech stuff, like I do find myself doing a lot of workarounds to hold up the current system because changing it is going to be really hard. And I think in this context, it's like, well, just change it because it's going to be better.
I could give a concrete example of this that's happening right now. So one of the organizations that I work with redid some major parts of their data architecture and how they're holding data and gathering it. And that was a big deal. And we really, I really liked a lot of the decisions that we made to go through that. Now we're looking for some add-ons, some tools to help us with some of our work. And a lot of those technology the vendors, they come with their own data architecture. And we've been forced to ask ourselves, do we throw out the work that we just did and go with this new data architecture because it comes with these other benefits? Do we try somehow to have both and take whatever data architecture, whatever records created by our vendor, and somehow match them to records we've already created in our architecture? Or do we say, no, we got to work with what we've got and how that works? And in this case, also for me, I leaned very heavily towards making it work and what we had to. And I think in this case, it's going to work out. But that discussion, I think you were sort of framing it as reform versus revolution. So it's make what you have better or blow it all up and have something that looks totally new. But they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Totally. I mean, I'm in like revolution mode right now in one of my projects. We're doing like a rip out and redo, but we still need forms. And so we have to rebuild all of our forms. And I'm seeing like within the revolution of having new forms, there's a lot of reform of like, we still want to ask most of the same questions that we had before. We might change the questions a little bit, like that's the reform part, but like they're going to be in this new context, which is the revolution part. And sometimes I wish we could just wipe all of the form questions and start over on that too, but we're keeping them. We made that decision. We're keeping the questions. I'm copying them over. It's a very tedious process. Revolution isn't as glamorous as it seems on Twitter or as it seems when you're reading about the commune in the French Revolution. It's kind of messy
or
and
like how a new technology will just make your whole life better.
Oh, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of glitter and and what do you call it? The like fake foam on stage. No, the why can't I think of the word? The fog machines, glitter and fog machines. And then you get the technology and I'm like, wait a second, it doesn't do half of the things I thought it was going to do.
All the glitters ain't gold, that's for sure. Or even if it does, like it takes a huge amount of work to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after that, you're going to still need to do the work, which is why Trotsky was so great. because he has this idea of perpetual revolution, which is like, cool, you have the revolution and then you can't have a new entrenched power layer that's just going to like be in charge for the next 40 years. Like those people will have to be replaced, and new ideas are going to have to be incorporated into like the governing layer of society. And he was like very vilified for this idea, especially by Stalin. But like, who likes Stalin now? I mean, he was horrible. But he was like, no, it's totally fine. I'll just put all of my cronies in and that'll be the revolution and they'll just be in charge forever.
Yeah, we've seen that happen.
And I see that with tech too. Like I might incorporate a thing that's the best thing since sliced bread, but in a few years, there's going to be a new best thing since sliced bread. So I think Trotsky was really onto something.
Yeah, perpetual revolution, he said. And just before that, I was thinking, even I said reform versus revolution, which is fine for a discussion. But what we found is reform and revolution. So I wonder if we could put it all together into perpetual reform and revolution. And you know what I would love to do a little thought process on? And I think, I'm trying to get together a group of like-minded folks to sort of sit with these concepts and mindfulness each week to think about this for tech. I think it would be interesting to have a group sort of think about together and then talk about looking at our work and say, where are aspects of reform and where are the aspects of revolution, and have I consciously thought about that and put it in place? Because we could probably identify it, but I know I'll say for myself, yeah. I don't think in the moment I've really framed it that way to think it through.
Yeah, I think like to put it into like a more concrete terms, I think for me in this project that I'm reflecting on, coming up with a new form platform feels revolutionary, but coming up with the form content feels reformy. It's like 1% better form content, completely transformative form technology.
Interesting. Yeah. And I was just talking to you maybe on the other side about how we're looking at changing one question on our form about gender identity and how we do that. But that could actually cause more revolution. I think that reform on the other end of it, because what we get from making that choice is it could spur a whole new line of work, new people involved, new power structures, new curriculum. Yeah, I think it's really interesting the play between reform and revolution.
Right.
I really
it's not as simple as socialists in a bar might lay it out to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something really powerful for each side. Like, any political thought, I think that, again, speaking for myself, any political thought that thinks they're right, and once it's in place, it could be unchanging and go on in perpetuity, is wrong. Goodbye. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Nope, not going to happen. More Trotsky-esque, even though he was talking about sort of the people in those structures too. But yeah, it just can't.
Well, I haven't gotten to the Trotsky section of my book yet. I just kind of know a little bit about him, but I finished Marx and Engels, and now I'm on Rosa Luxemburg, and then I still have to do Lenin, Trotsky, and Gramsci.
Yeah, that's a lot of,
and they all had to have different ideas from each other. I mean, they were part of the same movement, but they didn't all agree. And this is kind of like what we've been doing, Emily, is like, I really think it's so important to challenge our beliefs about tech and about political frameworks, and it's good to evolve. There's like a balance to be had between having enough confidence to put forward an idea that you think is credible, but not so much or so little confidence that you think that it's the only way to go, or like so obvious, or or like where you become extremely like pedantic about it. Not you personally, but yeah. I think that it just takes a lot of practice and a lot of humility and a lot of knowledge. It actually takes knowledge to admit that you're wrong or that you're learning. And I've just talked with a couple of different people over a while, just talking about this series that we're doing about how we share ideas, and we both end up changing our mind in some way. And how important it is to me to be able to change my mind publicly, to be challenged, or just to evolve my thinking.
Yes, absolutely. Especially that publicly part. Like I could tell very easily how different it was for me to engage in that kind of discourse online, in public versus something, personal. Yeah. So if I could bring up another thing that you are working on, the so reform versus revolution in job titles, right? So this made me think of no solo admin, and I know you've been talking and thinking really deeply about the importance of the admin role, not as a layaway station to a consulting or something else, but that being an admin, Salesforce or otherwise, is a really good, important, long-lasting job. And I like the idea of reform and revolution in that, because your job title, whatever, might stay the same, but because of the pace of technology, the change, it's always going to be a changing role. And I wonder if that can be both like a little bit jarring for people, so may want to get out of that role because of it, but also could be attractive for folks who previously had thought, oh, admin, you can't stay the same role. That's it. You just can't. But in this discussion, it really reminds me how much an admin role is about reform and revolution.
Yeah, and like conflating and swapping and challenging the binary of the two. Like, I was just drafting this article, and it might come out as a blog post on another blog. Well, I don't have much control over that, but I wrote like 3 paragraphs about this, which is kind of goofy, but I wrote 3 paragraphs about adding one field. And for me, it was like, I had actually put it off for a long time because I was like, it's just one field. Like, it's not a big change. It's not glamorous. It's, and I had it wasn't just one field, because I added the field, then I had to add it to a quick action. Then I had to populate it with data from a different field that used to kind of be mapped over there. Then I had to make an action that saves over that field when, whatever. There were like a couple of different things about how the data were actually going to work in that field. It has to do with mission statements, and mission statements change over time. So getting the right mission statement in that field at the right time is important. Anyway, seems kind of reformy to me. Doesn't seem revolutionary. It's just adding a field. But I got 7 emails back from people being like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for doing this. And so for other people, it was revolutionary because they didn't have to go to 2 places to update the mission statement anymore. And it also allowed to have a mission statement that was provided to us from an external person, and then have us be able to modify it without changing what the external person sees. So to them, it's their mission statement that they typed in, but for us, we might need to shorten it, or we might need to just kind of highlight the most important part of it, and we need to be able to do that in a different field. So now we take the mission statement, plop it into a different field, and let people edit it there, and then that field maps to a mail merge printout. So
the mail merge
always comes back to mail merge. But yeah, I was totally wrong. I'm saying it. I was wrong to think that this change was such a small deal, because to other people it was a really big deal. And while I wish I had gotten to it sooner, I'm glad that I was wrong, because it gave me a huge opportunity for learning on that front.
Yeah. That's a great share. Thank you.
So we don't actually know what's reform and what's revolution, but we have to make the best decisions that we can with the resources that we have.
Yeah. And have this conversation more, I think, again, like framing, and you just added a beautiful layer to it. Looking at our work and saying, these are my work tasks. Is this reform? Is this revolution? But not just for yourself, for
everyone. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks for diving deep and Marxist
political theory. I'm bringing
philosophy.
Foucault and Nietzsche to the next one then.
I'll be
Yeah.
there. Sounds good.
All right.